So it is more objective than subjective, and here again, very wide definition of the observer. It doesn't have to be person in the stadium. It could be person watching the game in the television, or even the person who will see this behavior in different contexts, not during watching the game, but afterwards, for example. And here it's important that the principle that UEFA uses and CAS is the principle of the hypothetical objective person. Again, the next condition is the intent, or actually the lack of intent. What we know is that it is not necessary for an offense to be committed under Article 14 of UEFA DR to prove that the person charged intended to insult. It's also connected with this principle of the objective observer. So we know that as we see the definition of the article of this provision, there is no precondition of intention to discriminate or to offense. So it's also confirmed with in the CAS decisions. It's also the other thing which I consider very important, because it's very often used by clubs or national associations, trying to argue that the concrete behavior wasn't a racist behavior, but more it was a political gesture. It's important because the offense, of course, the political gesture, it's also prohibited. Here you have this provision, it's Article 16 DR, so it's prohibited to use of gesture, words, objects, or any other means to transmit a provocative message that is not fit for a sport event, particularly provocative message that are of political, ideological, religious, or offensive nature. And the difference between those two offenses are the sanctions. So that's why clubs argue that some trying to qualify this as a political gesture, not the racist behavior. And what UEFA states is that if there is no direct link between the message and the racist connotation, they would rather qualify it as a political gesture, not than racist behavior. And so those are the steps to determine if the behavior could be qualified as a discriminatory. Some examples which were qualified as racist and not racist: Nazi salute or geographic display, shouting the word gypsy. Here, shouting the word gypsy, discrimination based on ethnic. Same with the next chant. Then chant Fenian bastards. It was considered racist or discriminatory because of the religious beliefs, and also because of the ethnic connotation. And the other example is are the symbol hijacked by Nazis, Zeltcross or SS skull. So those even now the UEFA consider them as a symbol of past. So they are always qualified as racist acts. And some example of not racist, and they are mostly they are denied to be a racist because UEFA could not find a direct connotation with any insult. in these banners. Here, another important issue, probably you know, that how to attach the responsibility, to whom attach this responsibility, and in case if we determine the racist act. And here you have the definition. It's Article 8 DR, who could be a subject of these rules, and the regulations may be subject to disciplinary measures and directive if such a rule is violated as a result of the conduct of one of its members, players, officials, or supporters. And here, even if the member association or the club concerned can prove the absence of any fault or negligence. So here we have a different approach to attaching the responsibility. Normally, as you know, there is a concept of fault or negligence to be liable. Here you have the club could be, or association could be liable without any fault or negligence. Why is that? The UEFA argumentation is like it was yesterday mentioned by Mecenas Bałaziński, that we know that in disciplinary measures UEFA has no direct authority to sanction the supporters. The only authority they have, they could sanction the member associations or clubs. That's why this principle of strict liability is present here. And it also is confirmed in many, all CAS awards, that the idea of this concept is that to ensure that the club will assume this responsibility for offences committed by its supporters, and that's the only way that UEFA has to influence the behavior of the fans, and it's via the club, via the entity that is supported by them. Otherwise, UEFA will have no measures to proceed and to fight with this racist behavior. And again, confirmed another like very famous award that it's a fundamental element of the current football regulatory, this principle of strict liability, and in order to deter hooliganism and other improper conduct of the part of supporters. Here we came to very important aspect that is very often discussed or argued by clubs because they try to avoid, of course, this strict liability, and they argue that people who offended, who acted discriminatory, they are not their fans. So what is the definition of the club supporter? And here we can see that the approach taken by UEFA and CAS is that the definition of the club supporter, that we cannot find this definition, and it's made on purpose, that it's not defined. And what we know from CAS awards jurisprudence is that we know it's not linked to race, nationality, or place of residence of the individual, and it's not connected with the contract that individual can have with club by purchasing a match ticket. And here again appeared this concept of reasonable and objective observer. So we could say that UEFA say that any individual whose behavior would lead a reasonable and objective observer to conclude that he or she was a supporter of the fan is enough. And here is the example of game between Serbia and Albania when there was a drone with the banner "Great Albania," came to the pitch, and even if still no one could actually identify the perpetrators, so it was not necessary to punish the Albanian, because the tribunal could easily attribute this behavior with the Albanian fans, and it was enough to decide that it was an Albanian supporter.